Hey viewers, my name's Cara. I'm your host for Tuesdays here on the Pagan Perspective. This week we are talking about ethics. We have covered the general topic of ethics in paganism and neo-paganism in the past, in previous years. So when I upload my video and do all the information, I will put together a little playlist of those ones that we have done in the past. But also remember, you can always look up our channel uploads. You can use the little search bar up in the corner and search for the term ethics, and hopefully a lot of those should show up if we used that word in the video titles or if we put it in the tags. But I'll put a little playlist together and then maybe we can share that playlist with all of our videos this week. The last time I remember doing a video about ethics on this channel, though, was years ago, and we've been doing this for 10 years, so it was many years ago. I do not remember what I said in the earlier video. I was probably like 20 at the time, maybe. So it's been about a decade, and I may have new things to say, I might not, I don't know. So we had lots of questions come in since last year and earlier this year from various people asking us about things related to ethics. So I'm just gonna go through all of them in whatever order seems to make sense to me, and they will all be in the description of this video as usual, so you can read them and find out who they came from. So one person just said, I'd love to see a video on pagan ethics. So here we go, we're talking about ethics this week. Lots of other people asked specific questions, and again, there are previous videos on this channel about ethics as well. And I'm sure many others floating about the internet and around YouTube about different branches, different traditions, different paths within paganism and ethical concerns related to them. And we've done lots of videos on individual subjects that may or may not be related to ethical issues within paganism, although we may not have tagged those with ethics because that wasn't how the question was worded. But we've talked about a lot of different topics that sometimes people bring up within the conversation of ethics. So lots of videos for you there. One question asked, do you believe in good and evil or a form of universal morality? Very nice, basic, simple question, at least simple in its asking, maybe not so simple to answer, but I'll try to keep this one brief since there's a lot of questions. I do not believe in the concept of wow, the term just flew out of my head. Absolute. Here we go. I do not believe in absolute evil, as some religious teachings do. And so because of that, it holds that if I don't believe in absolute evil, then I also must not believe in absolute good. I don't believe in complete 100% either way. I believe very much in the spectrum. And I don't think that most things in the world that we have to consider are completely one thing or the other, cut and dry. You know, most things are not that simple. And so, yeah, I don't believe in absolute evil or absolute good, I suppose you could say. But I do believe in positivity and negativity, and I believe in all different sorts of ratios in which they come together, and that a lot of things are situational. Another question was, and this one is very common, many religions have a text or some authority figure that dictates what is right and wrong. How do you decide what is right and wrong? What guides your sense of morality? And of course, this is a very common question that people ask us as pagans because we don't have a central governing authority that tells all of us what we must believe or what is right and what is wrong. And we don't have a central text to draw from, such as the Holy Bible or the Quran or anything like that, that other religions may have. Some other religions, philosophies, and spiritual paths may have a specific leader who they look to and follow that leader's example. And that may be true for some paths and traditions within paganism, within neo-paganism, because we might look to, if we are in a specific tradition or we are interested in following a specific tradition, we may look to whoever started that tradition and what did they teach and how did they intend for that tradition to be. And if we agree with those things, then we operate within that tradition and everything is well and good. And then if we do not agree with the ethics that a certain tradition puts forward, we may find another one whose ethics suit us better. Or there may be some that you can find where it really doesn't matter if everyone involved has slightly different views on certain ethical issues, and yet they can all work together. So it really depends on what you're looking to do and whether you're part of a specific tradition, a specific path, or if you're not. So that is a big question. So I would say something that I found briefly while Googling, because as you'll see in the next question I'm going to get to, someone was mentioning something related to ethics in Buddhism that was happening last year at some point, and I don't know exactly what it was. So I was trying to Google and see if I could find any articles from that time that would give me a clue. And I don't think I found what this person was actually talking about, but I did find an article on pathos in the Buddhism section. It was talking about ethics, and a portion of it discusses the stages of development and how people's sort of ethical compass evolves and changes the way that we get our ethics. I don't know if there was a better way I could have said that, probably. The way that we get our personal ethics changes and evolves as we develop as human beings. And so it talks about sort of the initial stage of development with ethics starts off with someone telling us what to do, someone laying down the rules, and we just have to learn what the rules are and follow them as given. So it may be a religious group, it may be our parents, it may be our teachers in school. Generally, when we start out life, we get our sense of ethics from someone else telling us what is right and wrong, and we just have to know that and follow those rules. And then the second stage goes into having internalized that set of ethics and those rules for ourselves so that we continue to follow those rules and congratulate or punish ourselves accordingly, even when no one else is there to admonish us if we do wrong, right? So when you're no longer in your parents' home, but you still follow their rules because it's just ingrained. And it's not that someone's standing over your shoulder telling you, don't do that, but it's internalized. And then the third stage being the point where we start to develop our own understanding of ethics for any given situation and realizing that certain situations call for different answers and different circumstances may completely change our ideas of what is right and wrong in the circumstance. We may have a personal idea of, generally I think this is what's right, generally I think this is what's wrong, and in most situations those work. But there may be specific situations in which we have to figure out what is best for that circumstance. And so that is something that falls into that third stage of development and ethics that this article talks about. So I'll put that article in there as well. And that's not what the whole article is. There's a lot more discussion of Buddhist ethics in that article, but this was just one section. And it related to this question for me of where do we get what dictates our sense of right and wrong. So I do believe that a lot of it is social, especially when we are not part of a religion that has a central text, and we may not have a specific leader that we look up to, but we might, again, depending on your tradition, depending on who you look up to, who inspires you. We talked about that last month here on the collab. But yeah, so I think a lot of it is social, even when it's not that, because depending on how you were raised, depending on the people around you, the people you went to school with, things like that, you can pick up a sense of what's right and wrong from a lot of different places and a lot of different people and circumstances. And if you hung out with a group of friends who thought that one thing was okay, maybe you also thought it was okay, and then maybe later on circumstances of your life change, you start hanging out with a new group of people and they have very different views of that thing, and at that point you have to think, whoa, wait, what? And that's where that sort of third stage comes in, and you're like, all right, well, do I agree that it's wrong and I see now that what we did before I now think is wrong, or do I still think that what we did was okay, and these people maybe just have a bias against it because of how they were raised. So there's all kinds of questions that come from that, but I do think a lot of it, at least initially, is social, like where we get our first sense of ethics and morality and what we think of as right and wrong. And there definitely are still overall things that are kind of like all of society's general ethics. There are very few things that all of society agrees on, but there are certain, big ones that most people agree are wrong. But then, of course, there are things that people will argue about. And the article also talks about it has to do with having the correct mental state to be able to make those decisions and decide within the circumstance what is right and wrong. Because if something mentally is not there and able to process these things in a healthy way, in a sane way, whatever the case may be, some people can come to their own conclusions about what's right and wrong that are incorrect responses according to general society or according to a lot of other people, at least. So there's that. The next big question, this is one about, they asked about Buddhism. So this person said, givening, I can talk, okay. Given what's happening in the Buddhist scene at the moment, which this was asked in like late 2018. And this is why I was trying to Google to find out what it was, because they didn't say what it was, and I do not keep up very much on Buddhist news specifically. I didn't hear about anything in specific, so I don't know what they were referring to. But they said, given what's happening in the Buddhist scene at the moment, opinions about sexual relationships in groups and or between teachers and students. So this is not a question that just has to do with one community, obviously. This is a much larger question. Sexual relationships in groups in general, it's kind of like, forming relationships with your coworkers kind of thing. We could liken that to the same situation. I always think that that's something where you might be in a workplace, for example, that prohibits it. You might be in a spiritual group that prohibits it. Your specific working group may decide that within their own group rules for operation or behavioral expectations that they do not want that to happen. And a lot of the time it's for reasons of what will happen if those people then break up. So like, it's not so bad if you meet someone and start a relationship and you're happy and you're doing this thing together and you're in the same group. But what people are really worried about, I think, is what's going to happen if you break up. Is it going to bring tensions into the group that will be detrimental to the working process? Is one of you going to want to leave so that you're not around the other one? And then there's going to be this kind of weird feeling that like someone stayed and someone left, and now the group energy is different. Or are you both going to leave and then the group loses both of you? So the article that I mentioned before also talked about being able to reason out, like, why are these rules in place? And that is something that I feel like definitely applies to this question. Like, understanding why the leaders of specific groups may not want you to get into a romantic or sexual relationship with other people within the group. It's mainly because they're worried about what happens if you break up or if something goes wrong or if you get in a fight. And I think that that is valid. And so I think that if you do end up having a relationship or one is starting, that everyone just has to be very aware of those things and discuss those things. And if you're not willing to come up with a fair result for a contingency plan for if that happens, then you have to make decisions about whether or not to have the relationship or how to pursue that relationship, knowing those things. And other groups actually prefer to only be made up of people in romantic partnerships already. And so there might be certain groups that are only made up of legally married couples. I don't personally know any of those, but I know that they exist, or that some groups prefer to have people who are already in relationships. And so if there are certain types of magical workings being done that involve that, you already have your specific partner there for that, and you have them there for support, and that you're doing things together. It's a much different energy. So yeah, that depends on the group in question. And between teachers and students, that one even more so, I think, than just, with someone else in the group. But if it's like the teacher or the leader versus just another member, that brings in an issue of power dynamics that has to be dealt with very carefully. And I think there are many examples that we can pull from TV and movies and stuff like that, where we can think of examples of, like, here's a relationship between a teacher and a student, or a leader and another member of their group, that worked out fine, and why did it work out fine? Here's why, and use that as a model. Or here's why it crashed and burned. I think in general the power concerns at play there are something that need to be navigated very carefully. And I'm thinking of this in terms of like a working group within paganism, right? If you're talking about like in a school situation, if you're taking a class and it's a teacher-student thing, I think that is even more difficult to navigate, and things like that, again, generally should just be avoided, just because there's so much difficulty involved with that. And especially if there are age differences that actually are affected by laws, so like a big enough age difference that is around a law that is in place, things like that need to be taken very seriously and handled very carefully. So yeah, I don't know what the specific situation was that this person was originally talking about, but yeah, just in general, sexual relationships and teacher-student relationships, those are definitely a big thing and need to be handled carefully and on a case-by-case basis. I really can't give you a general rule, except that, like, maybe in general, no. But yeah, that's just very general, and it'll depend on the situation. But be careful. And understand the reasons why. If people are asking you not to form relationships, think about why that is. Maybe even talk to them about why that is and any of your concerns. That said, if you are coming into a group and you already have a relationship with someone else in the group, I think that's different. If you are entering a group, you are joining a group, and you already have a romantic and or sexual relationship with another person who is joining the group with you, I think that is a very different circumstance. And if a group has rules about nobody in the group can be in a relationship with one another, then it either has to be an exception for people who were already in a relationship when they joined, or those people don't join that group because that's not what that group leadership wants. Who knows? Hopefully it's not the latter case, but yes, that would have to be treated differently in my mind. Next question, there is a couple more. Next question is ethics in hypothetical situations. Like, so I scrolled up in my other app and it stopped the video. Hopefully I will be able to use something to put these two clips together so I don't have to redo the entire thing. The last two questions are specifically kind of magical or spellcraft related ethics questions. So the first one said, ethics in hypothetical situations. Is it ever okay to magically harm or bind or infringe another's right if that person is harming others or themselves? So this, I think, is like the self-defense question. I personally believe that doing something in self-defense is okay, generally. Of course, it depends on the extent to which you take that self-defense. Is it above and beyond what was necessary to defend yourself from whatever was happening? But in general, self-defense, I think, is okay, ethically. I do not believe that we should just sit there and take abuse from other people, magically or otherwise, because we don't believe in defending ourselves. I personally don't think that is how we should operate. And we've done videos on this channel previously specifically about self-defense, magical self-defense and protection. So you can hear more about that in those videos. But also, like, binding someone else because they were harming others or themselves, again, I generally think that that's okay within our sort of overall community system of ethics. It depends on the situation, and it depends on what exactly you are doing. But yeah, in general, things for self-defense, I personally think are within the realm of what is okay for us to do, generally. The phrase infringing another's right, is it okay to magically infringe another's right if they are harming others or themselves? I would have to know what rights the specific situation is claiming to possibly be infringing, because I don't believe that anyone has a right to harm someone else. So if it's a matter of, can I do something magically to prevent this person from causing harm because they are doing something very harmful in the community or to a specific person or whatever, I don't think that person has the right to do that. So I don't see that as infringing on any right. But I would have to know, again, you said hypothetical situations. So yeah, unfortunately, I would have to know, like, what right would you be infringing that you think, whatever. In general, I don't think it has to do with infringing rights. It's more about messing with someone's free will is what we talk about. But yeah, I mean, if someone's will is to cause extreme harm, I think that we have the right to defend ourselves and each other. Generally. Yeah. And again, we've talked about self-defense separately in other videos. And the last one that also is having to do with spell work. If you practice spell work, do you believe it is okay to cast a spell on or about someone else without their knowledge? This might be something that we've talked about in the past. I know I've talked about it in the past in general, but I don't know if it was in a video, and I don't know if it was here or on my personal channel. But yeah, there are different magical traditions around the world that have different views on this. Some traditions say that the magic works best if people don't know that you're doing it. Others say it's not right to do magic involving someone else if they don't know about it, and that you should tell them. Okay? I generally believe that if the situation is something where, like, you are trying to help someone or you want to offer help, it's best if you can ask their permission or let them know, and then if they really don't want something done, we don't do it, or we scale back what we're doing, or we change what we're doing. I think in general it is acceptable and fine to send someone energy to help them with their own goals. It is acceptable to send someone, or like do a blessing, things like that. But ultimately, I try to be very aware of the fact that what we think is right in a given situation for someone's life may not be what's right for them, and it may not be what they want to happen. So if we're doing a magic working to try to make something happen in someone's life without their knowledge, I think that that is not something that I would personally do, because I don't want to mess up the way they're trying to do things in their life. So instead of saying, here's what I want to happen in this other person's life, which is against their free will, I might send them positive energy, or I might say I want to send them energy to help them manifest their goals, or I might ask the universe to help the situation in their life play out in the way that is best for them. Something like that. I think is a better way to go about such things. Is it okay to cast a spell on or about someone else without their knowledge? Yeah. So there's that, but then obviously I think there are some situations where it would not be a good idea to tell the person beforehand or ask their permission, God's forbid. So if you're doing something like binding someone who's been doing extreme harm, it may be dangerous, or very unwise at least, for you to go to that person and say, hey, do you mind if I do a spell to stop you from doing this? Like, that's not gonna happen. That's not the way it works. Or it may not be the way it works depending on the situation. And, it might be unwise or dangerous to go to that person and say, hey, I'm gonna do this. Like, just so you know, if you don't stop this behavior, I'll make you stop, something like that. That could be a potentially dangerous escalation. So again, it depends on the situation. If it's a self-defense type of thing, I generally think that it's something where it would not be safe for us to go to that person and tell them or ask them about doing something. So in those regards, to me, it makes sense that most of the time the intended target of that magical working probably isn't going to know about it. And that is something that makes sense to me because of the situation. In basically any other situation, like if you want to send someone healing energy, or you want to, whatever, help them get that job that they've been looking for, or even a better one that they might not even know is an option for them yet, whatever. Things like that, I think it's a great idea to let the person know that you'd like to help them, and maybe ask them, would it be okay if I did this, that, or the other thing? Would it be okay if I lit a candle for you? Would it be okay if I pulled a card for you, if you are someone who reads cards? Like, hey, I've been thinking about your situation. Would it be okay if I pulled a card for you and talked to you about it? And can I help you out in some way? I think that in those situations, it's great to let those people know. But yeah, it depends on the situation. There might be situations where it's not a good idea to let the other party know what's going on, or tell them that you're going to do something, because there might be negative escalation as a result of that. So yeah, those are all the questions this week, all related to ethics. So hopefully I'll be able to put these two little clips together. Otherwise you won't see this, because I'll just be re-recording it. So yeah, thanks for watching. Happy July. I can't believe it's already July. And I will see you next week. Thanks very much for watching and listening. Until next time, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.